Alina had always prided herself on being a good mother. She had routines, schedules, and little habits that made life smooth. At least, that's how it appeared from the outside. Every morning, she woke up before Daniel, her 12-year-old son, to prepare his breakfast, pack his lunch, and make sure his uniform was neat. She walked him to the bus stop, watched him climb aboard the yellow bus with other children laughing around him, and waved until he was out of sight. Then she returned to the quiet house, feeling both proud and empty. Over the years, she had convinced herself that keeping things orderly was enough. That as long as Daniel was taken care of, and as long as Victor, her husband, was provided for, everything would be fine. But it wasn't fine. It hadn't been fine for years. The silence that had grown between Alina and Victor was not the comfortable, peaceful kind of silence that comes from understanding each other. It was heavy, thick, and suffocating. They had stopped talking about dreams, about hopes, about the future. Even the simplest exchanges, like asking how each other's day had been, had become mechanical. They were living under the same roof, but emotionally, they had drifted apart. Alina often caught herself staring at Victor across the kitchen table, seeing him only as a figure who belonged to her daily routine. Someone she shared bills and chores with, but not a partner she truly loved. And every time she noticed that distance, a quiet ache settled inside her chest. One that no amount of coffee or busy work could soothe. Alina's loneliness wasn't something she could easily talk about. Friends had families and lives of their own. Colleagues at work had their own struggles. Even Victor didn't know how deeply she felt invisible. She tried to bury it, to distract herself with painting, small projects around the house, and the endless to-do lists that made her feel like she was accomplishing something. But the ache returned every evening when she lay in bed next to Victor and felt nothing but a hollow absence. The warmth, the laughter, the connection, they were gone. Then Adrian appeared. It wasn't sudden, not in a way that would have raised alarms. He was gentle, kind, and attentive. The kind of person who could make a quiet conversation feel like the most important moment in the world. They met at the community art studio she had joined months earlier, a place she had gone simply to keep herself busy. Adrian was soft-spoken, with a way of listening that made her feel seen. As though the invisible parts of herself, the sadness, the longing, the things she had stopped sharing with Victor, finally mattered to someone. At first, it was purely innocent. They talked about painting techniques, colors, and inspiration. But slowly, the conversations became personal. He asked how she was, really. He noticed when she seemed sad, when she laughed too lightly, when her eyes avoided meeting his, and in his attentiveness, Alina felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Live. The feelings didn't hit her all at once. They started small, like a spark in a quiet room. She didn't notice how often she thought about Adrian after leaving the studio. She didn't realize how much lighter her steps felt when she knew she would see him. She didn't see how the emotional connection she was forming with him was filling the emptiness that Victor had left behind. The distance that had silently grown between them over the years. She knew it was dangerous. She knew she was standing on a line she should not cross. She told herself repeatedly, "This is only conversation. This is only friendship. This is harmless." And yet every time Adrian laughed at something she said, every time his eyes lingered just a little too long, her heart betrayed her words. She was craving attention, affection, and understanding, things she hadn't realized she had been starving for until they appeared in someone else. Alina didn't notice the small signs that her home life was about to collide with this fragile, emotional affair. She was so caught up in the escape, the feeling of being truly noticed, that she ignored the growing tension in her own house. Victor remained distant as ever, and Daniel, perceptive beyond his years, sometimes watched his mother with questioning eyes, sensing her mood changes, sensing the unspoken. Children notice things adults try to hide, even when adults think they are careful. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Daniel had soccer practice scheduled for 4 o'clock. But due to a last-minute change, he returned home nearly an hour earlier than usual. Alina had been at the living room couch with Adrian, discussing a painting she had been working on, talking in low tones, close enough that their hands almost brushed. The conversation wasn't inappropriate. It was simply intimate in a way that wasn't meant to be shared with anyone else. A closeness that had developed because they both understood each other in a way Alina hadn't felt in years. She was unaware that Daniel had come home early. Daniel opened the front door and froze. At first he didn't move, unsure if he should speak or retreat. His young mind tried to process what he saw. His mother, the person he trusted the most. Sitting so close to another man, he didn't understand the details he didn't need to. Children have a way of sensing tension and knowing when something isn't right without grasping the whole picture. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He didn't storm away. He just stood there, frozen, taking in the scene. Alina turned and their eyes met. Her stomach dropped. She knew that look. It was confusion mixed with hurt. It wasn't anger. It wasn't accusation. It was pure, raw emotion, and it hit her harder than she expected. She realized in that moment that no matter how careful she had been with her feelings, her choices, her emotional attachment to Adrian had consequences beyond her own life. Her son had seen enough to feel the shift. He may not have understood the nuances, the complexity, or the subtle emotional longing that had led her to this moment, but he had felt the change in the air. And that was enough. Adrian, sensing the sudden shift, stood quickly and whispered something polite before leaving the house. Elena's heart ached, not just because of his departure, but because she knew that this incident had cracked open something in her family that could not be ignored. She walked toward Daniel slowly, trying to find the right words, but he turned and retreated to his room without a word. His silence spoke volumes. It was not rebellious or defiant. It was cautious, wary, and deeply hurt. Alina sat on the couch for a long time after Adrian left, staring at the empty space where he had been. The quiet of the house pressed in on her, louder than ever before. She replayed the moment in her mind, again and again, feeling the weight of what her son had witnessed. This wasn't just about attraction or longing. It wasn't just about finding comfort in someone who saw her for who she was. It was about family. Her choices had consequences, and her son had felt them first. That night, Daniel avoided dinner. He didn't say a word to Alina or Victor. He went straight to his room, and the house was filled with a silence so thick that Alina could hear her own heartbeat. She realized something crucial. Children understand more than adults give them credit for. They feel emotional shifts. They sense hidden longings. They notice when a parent is no longer fully present, even when that parent tries to hide it behind a polite smile or a busy schedule. Her son had understood that something had changed between her and the life she had promised him. Alina lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Her mind was a whirlwind of guilt, longing, and fear. She hadn't betrayed Daniel. She hadn't betrayed Victor physically. But she had allowed her emotions to drift somewhere they shouldn't have. She had sought validation outside her marriage, even if it was just emotional. And in that pursuit, she had opened a door that could not be closed. She realized that this one careless, intimate connection, one that had felt harmless at the time, had already caused a ripple that would affect her son, her marriage, and herself in ways she had not anticipated. For hours, she pondered what to do. Should she confront Victor? Should she speak to Daniel? Should she ignore it, hoping the moment would be forgotten? But deep down, she knew that ignoring it was impossible. Trust had been shaken, even if the damage wasn't immediately visible. She understood that children remember feelings more than words. Daniel would carry the memory of that moment, the tension in the air, the subtle closeness that was never meant for him, and it would affect his perception of family and love. The following morning, Alina moved through the house with a new awareness. Every glance, every word, every gesture mattered. She smiled at Daniel as he ate his breakfast, but the smile felt fragile, forced even. She noticed Victor's distant eyes as he read the newspaper. And for the first time in a long time, she wondered what he had noticed, what he had felt. Her mind wandered back to Adrian and the comfort he had offered, but she quickly pushed the thought away. The cost had become too real, and her priorities had shifted overnight. Alina knew one thing with absolute clarity. She could not continue down the path she had been walking. Not if she wanted to protect Daniel, not if she wanted to save her marriage, and not if she wanted to save herself from the consequences of her emotional drift. She had been searching for attention, for validation, for connection, but at what cost? She had almost lost sight of the life she had built, the child who depended on her, and the man she had once promised to love through thick and thin. The night after Daniel had walked in on Alina with Adrian, the house was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. Normally, the background hum of a busy home television sounds, Daniel's laughter, the clatter of dishes filled the air. That evening, the silence was heavy, almost tangible. Alina moved carefully, as if each step might break the fragile calm. Every glance she cast toward Daniel's bedroom door made her stomach twist. He had not spoken to her since he saw the scene, and she knew that even a single word could be loaded with more meaning than she was ready to face. Victor sat in the living room, reading a book, though it was clear he wasn't actually reading. He kept pausing, his eyes lifting to the empty hallway where Daniel had gone. Alina could feel his unspoken questions pressing on her, and she realized that this night would force conversations that had been avoided for years. They had both been pretending that everything was fine, that life could continue unchanged. But the moment had shattered that illusion. Alina sat down on the couch and took a deep breath. She thought about Adrian, the comfort he had offered, and the connection that had grown between them. But now she didn't feel the same longing she had yesterday. Instead, she felt fear. Fear for her son, fear for her marriage, fear for herself. She had been looking for validation, attention, and emotional closeness. But she had almost overlooked the people who mattered most. She had almost lost her family, and that realization struck her harder than she expected. Hours passed slowly. Daniel did not come out of his room, and Alina resisted the urge to knock on the door. She wanted to give him space to allow him to process what he had witnessed. Children are delicate in ways adults forget. They absorb emotions like sponges, and they store them in quiet corners of their hearts. Alina knew that Daniel was thinking deeply about what he had seen, and she felt the weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders. She had to make things right, but she did not yet know how. Finally, there was a soft knock at her bedroom door. Alina held her breath. "Mom." Daniel's voice was quiet, tentative, almost fragile. She opened the door slightly, peeking at him. His eyes were wide, searching, and she saw the shadow of hurt there. "Can I come in?" he asked. She nodded, and he stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't sit immediately. He just stood there, shifting from one foot to the other. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question pierced Alina's heart. It was simple, direct, but it carried a weight she had not expected. He was not accusing her. He was not angry. He was afraid, and his fear was wrapped in a single word: happiness. Alina sank onto the edge of the bed. She didn't know how to answer. Could she say yes? Could she say no? Could she admit the truth without shattering his sense of safety? I don't know," she finally whispered. Her voice trembled. "I've been confused." Daniel nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He didn't speak for a long moment. Alina could feel the tension in the room, the fragile bridge between them quivering under the weight of unspoken truths. Finally, he sat beside her on the bed, careful to leave space between them. I didn't want us to break," he said softly. The simplicity of the statement made Alina ache. She had been so consumed by her own feelings that she had forgotten the people who were most vulnerable, the ones whose trust depended entirely on her. That night, Alina decided she could no longer ignore Victor. She needed to speak honestly, not to defend herself, not to justify her feelings, but to lay everything bare and face the reality they had been avoiding for years. She found him sitting at the kitchen table, the soft lamplight highlighting his tired face. He looked up at her as she approached, sensing that something important was about to be said. "I need to talk to you," Alina began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Victor put down his book, his attention now fully on her. She told him everything: the loneliness, the emotional distance, the longing she had felt. The connection with Adrian, the moment Daniel had walked in. She didn't shy away from her feelings, but she also didn't include anything inappropriate. She spoke of emotional needs, unmet expectations, and the realization that they had stopped being partners long before Adrian had appeared. Victor listened quietly, its expression unreadable at first. There was silence as he processed her words. A silence heavy with years of unspoken frustration, disappointment, and regret. Then he spoke, quietly, without anger. "I thought you stopped loving me," he admitted. His voice was small, vulnerable, almost as if he were afraid of Elena's response. The words were honest, raw, and painful. They revealed the truth that had been simmering between them for years. They had both been drifting, both withdrawing, both searching elsewhere for something they should have nurtured at home. Tears filled Elena's eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "I was just lonely. I didn't know how to fix it, and I made a mistake by looking outside our marriage for something that should have been here." She gestured around the kitchen, encompassing the house, the family, the life they had built. "I love our family. I love Daniel. I want to fix this." Victor reached across the table and took her hand. His grip was firm but gentle. "I love our family too," he said, "and I know I've been distant. I didn't realize how much we were drifting apart until now." They sat in silence for a few moments, hands intertwined, the weight of years, of neglect, longing, and misunderstanding pressing down on them. But within that silence was a fragile hope, a small spark that perhaps they could rebuild what had been broken. Over the next few days, Alina and Victor took small steps toward each other. They began talking not about schedules or bills, but about memories, hopes, and feelings. They remembered the first apartment they had shared, the silly arguments, the late-night conversations on the balcony. Laughter returned slowly, quietly, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real, and it was a start. Meanwhile, Daniel observed the changes quietly. Children notice effort more than words, and he began to sense the shift in the air. His mother's eyes no longer held the same tension. His father's presence felt warmer, more attentive. The house felt lighter, safer. Daniel's trust in his parents had been shaken, but he could feel that they were trying to repair it. And that gave him a cautious sense of hope. Alina also had to confront her feelings for Adrian. She deleted his number from her phone, resisting the urge to reach out. She realized that the connection they had shared was not sustainable, not because it was wrong, but because it threatened everything she truly valued. Longing and attraction can feel like love, but they are not substitutes for the family, trust, and commitment that had been neglected. She understood that her focus now had to be on the people who depended on her. Daniel and Victor. One evening, Alina found herself standing in front of the art studio where she had first met Adrian. She paused, remembering the connection, the warmth, and the validation she had felt there. A part of her still ached for the excitement, the attention, the feeling of being truly seen. But she also remembered Daniel's wide, questioning eyes and the fragile trust that had been broken. She turned away, making a silent promise to herself. She would not let fleeting emotions endanger her family. She would rebuild. She would try. Alina also realized that rebuilding trust would not be instant. It would take effort, honesty, and vulnerability every single day. She began writing small notes to Daniel, leaving them in his lunchbox or on his pillow. Simple messages like, "I love you," or "I'm proud of you," or we are going to get through this together. Daniel noticed. He read them quietly, sometimes smiling, sometimes pausing to think. But slowly, he began to feel the safety and love that had been shaken, and that gave Alina the courage to keep trying. Victor, too, changed. He made an effort to be more present, more attentive, more open to conversations that went beyond schedules and responsibilities. They cooked. Together, they shared small moments of connection. They laughed, cried, and remembered what it felt like to truly be a team. And though the pain of recent events lingered, it became a foundation for honest, lasting change rather than a wedge that tore them apart. The moment with Daniel, the one that had triggered this upheaval, remained vivid in Elena's mind. She thought about his face, the look of confusion and hurt that had been brief but so powerful. She realized that children often become the mirror in which parents see the truth. Daniel had forced her to face her own loneliness, her emotional drift, and her responsibility to the people she loved most. That day, he had unwittingly saved their family by exposing what needed to be fixed. Alina also understood the importance of humility. She could no longer pretend that she had all the answers, that she had done everything right, or that she could navigate life's challenges without vulnerability. She had to acknowledge mistakes, confront emotions honestly, and take deliberate action to repair the damage. And in doing so, she discovered something unexpected: the power of forgiveness, not just forgiving each other, but forgiving herself for the choices she had made and the mistakes she had allowed. The following weeks were full of small but significant changes. Alina and Victor had both committed to rebuilding their marriage, and they understood that this process would be slow, uncomfortable, and at times painful. It was not about grand gestures or dramatic confessions anymore. It was about presence, attention, and effort. Every evening, they shared a cup of tea on the balcony, talking about nothing and everything, allowing laughter and shared memories to return. They spoke honestly about their feelings, about the loneliness that had crept in, and about the mistakes they had made. Slowly, the emotional distance that had defined their life for years began to shrink. Daniel noticed the change first. He observed the way his mother smiled when his father walked into the room, the subtle warmth in their interactions, and the moments of shared attention he had never seen before. He saw Victor helping Alina with small tasks around the house, noticing the effort she had put into her painting, asking questions, and genuinely listening. It was different from before, not forced, not dramatic, just real. Daniel began to feel the security he had feared lost. He still had moments of doubt, but those were now tempered with hope. Alina continued to reflect on her own emotions. She realized that her longing for Adrian had been more about what she had been missing than about him as a person. The attention, the emotional closeness, the feeling of being seen, all of it had highlighted the emptiness she had felt in her marriage. But now she understood that true love is not about seeking validation from someone else. It is about nurturing the relationships that matter most, even when it requires effort, patience, and vulnerability. One evening, she passed by the art studio where she had first met Adrian. She paused, memories flooding back the soft conversations, the attention, the emotional connection that had felt so comforting. But as she remembered, she also thought of Daniel's eyes, wide and questioning, the hurt that had flashed there, even in a brief moment. She understood clearly that she could not allow herself to repeat the mistakes that had caused so much disruption in their lives. The studio became a symbol of a chapter she had closed, a reminder that fleeting emotions are no substitute for the family she loved. Alina and Victor began creating new rituals together. Simple moments became significant: cooking dinner together, sharing stories about their day, reading books in the living room, and walking Daniel to school when possible. They laughed at small mishaps, reminded each other of the good memories from their early days, and even shared dreams for the future. These small actions were more meaningful than anything dramatic could have been because they demonstrated commitment. consistency, and love in action. Daniel, still cautious, began to participate. He joined in conversations, smiled more, and gradually allowed himself to feel the warmth of his parents' renewed attention. He started telling his mother about his school day, his small victories, and his worries. Alina listened with patience, careful to validate his feelings, to acknowledge the moments of hurt he had experienced, and to reassure him that their family could overcome challenges together. The trust that had been shaken was slowly being rebuilt, one conversation at a time. Victor also faced his own challenges. He realized that his emotional distance had contributed as much as Elena's wandering feelings. He reflected on his own behavior, acknowledging that he had stopped nurturing their relationship. Assuming that life's responsibilities were enough to sustain a marriage, he understood now that love requires active participation, attention, and care. He began to show appreciation for Elena's efforts, complimenting her work, expressing gratitude for her presence, and engaging in small acts of kindness that had long been forgotten. Together, Alina and Victor also addressed deeper issues that had lingered for years. They spoke about expectations, disappointments, and regrets, not to dwell on the past, but to understand each other and prevent future misunderstandings. They shared fears they had never voiced, vulnerabilities they had hidden behind routine and silence. Each conversation, each acknowledgement, became a step toward rebuilding a foundation stronger than before, one rooted in honesty and emotional connection. Daniel witnessed these changes and began to internalize a powerful lesson about human relationships. He saw that mistakes do not define people. Actions after mistakes do. He learned that love is not always easy, that it requires forgiveness, patience, and effort. He understood that people can change if they are willing to face their weaknesses and confront uncomfortable truths. Slowly, the house that had once felt heavy with tension and unspoken words now resonated with warmth, laughter, and the quiet joy of a family striving to reconnect. Alina also learned a personal lesson about self-awareness and restraint. She realized that emotions like longing, attraction, and curiosity can appear suddenly and feel overwhelming. But recognizing them and choosing not to act destructively is a sign of strength, not weakness. She had felt the spark with Adrian, but she had also felt the consequences, the ripple effect of her emotional choices. That awareness helped her recommit to her family, not out of obligation, but out of love and understanding. Over time, Alina and Victor created new memories too, counterbalanced the ones tainted by distance and secrecy. They celebrated small victories together, from Daniel's achievements at school to successfully completing home projects as a team. They laughed at mistakes rather than criticizing each other. They shared quiet moments of tenderness, like holding hands while watching the sunset or sharing a glance that spoke volumes without words. These moments, though simple, reinforced the emotional bonds that had been weakened and reminded each of them why they had chosen to build a life together in the first place. Daniel, increasingly confident in the renewed stability of his family, began to open up more. He shared stories from school, talked about friendships, and even voiced small concerns about things that troubled him. Alina and Victor listened attentively, validating his experiences and reassuring him of their constant support. They encouraged him to express himself freely, creating an environment of trust where he felt safe to be himself. Slowly, the unspoken fear that had followed the incident with Adrian began to fade. Alina also focused on herself, nurturing her own emotional health while remaining committed to her family. She resumed painting, but now it was not an escape from life's challenges. Became a source of joy, reflection, and creative expression that she could share with Daniel and Victor. Her art became a metaphor for the reconstruction of their lives, each brushstroke representing effort, care, and love, rebuilding what had been fractured. Victor, too, found a renewed sense of purpose. He engaged more fully with family activities, invested in conversations, and actively sought ways to support Alina emotionally. He realized that maintaining a marriage requires continual effort, attention to small details, and emotional investment. Through shared responsibility and communication, he began to experience the satisfaction of reconnecting deeply with both his wife and his son. Months passed. The family began to feel whole again. The shadows of past mistakes lingered but no longer dominated their lives. Alina and Victor's commitment to each other became evident, not through dramatic declarations, but through consistent, loving action. Daniel's trust, initially fragile and shaken, grew stronger each day as he witnessed his parents' dedication to rebuilding their bond. The family learned that resilience, honesty, and sustained effort could heal wounds that once seemed irreparable. Alina often reflected on the turning point, the moment when Daniel had walked in on her with Adrian. It had been painful, shocking, and filled with guilt. But she now understood that it had been a necessary awakening. It forced her to confront the emotional voids in her life, the neglect in her marriage, and the responsibilities she held toward her family. That single moment, filled with tension and unspoken emotions, had initiated a chain of events that ultimately saved the family from further distance and emotional breakdown. Daniel, too, carried a lesson from that day. He learned the complexity of human emotions, the fragility of trust, and the importance of communication. He understood that mistakes do not destroy families when addressed with honesty, effort, and love. He saw the value of forgiveness, both given and received, and how resilience could transform pain into growth. Alina and Victor began planning small trips together, moments that had been rare in the past. They wanted to create joyful memories that would cement the new foundation of their family. Even the simplest outings, picnics in the park, visits to the local museum, or quiet walks by the river became opportunities to reinforce connection, to laugh, to share stories, and to feel present in each other's lives. The family home, once filled with tension and distance, became a place of warmth and stability. Shared meals, conversations, and evening routines created a rhythm that Daniel had missed. Alina and Victor's renewed attention and presence created a nurturing environment that reinforced love, trust, and safety. Every day became an opportunity to strengthen bonds, to express care, and to grow together.